Good evening, everybody. He is the eccentric Aldertonian, often funny, charming, gaff-prone. He makes us laugh. Some people he makes shout when they listen to him or see him on the television. But he is the one and only Boris Johnson. He is something of a one-off. But today was interesting, because today, as Foreign Secretary at Chatham House, he delivered a speech. It's a speech that was heavy in content, and a speech in many ways that in style was different to what we're used to from Boris. It was scripted. It was really quite professional. And he backed Donald Trump's approach to the North Korean crisis, insisting that the White House has an absolute duty to protect the USA. Have a listen and see if you agree with me. This is a more statesmanlike Boris Johnson.
Kim Jong-un and the world need to understand that when the 45th President of the United States contemplates a regime led by a man who not only threatens to reduce New York to ashes, but who stands on the verge of acquiring the power to make good on his threat, I'm afraid that the US President, whoever he or she might be, will have an absolute duty to prepare any option to keep safe not only the American people, but all those who have sheltered under the American nuclear umbrella.
Slow, deliberate, scripted, professional, serious, intent, and he went on to say that dialogue and diplomacy should remain open.
That diplomacy has helped to make the world safer, more secure, more confident, and therefore more prosperous. It has helped to avoid what might otherwise have been a Gadarene rush to destruction, in which the world was turned into a great arena of Mexican standoffs, a nuclear version of the final scene of Reservoir Dogs.
Well, I think Reservoir Dogs was a little bit more Boris-like, and then when we got to the questions and answers, well, see what you think, but I would say it was Boris falling more back into his usual bumbling ways.
I don't think anybody can conceivably want a military solution to this problem. And indeed, I know many who have studied the matter find it very hard to see how the nuclear solution, military solution...
That's more like Boris, isn't it?
Might play out. And yet, clearly, it must remain on the table. There must be the possibility of some kind of military option. There is a spectrum of things that could be done. That possibility must, at least theoretically, be maintained on the table.
Well, Reservoir Dogs and bumbling and stumbling shows you that however hard he tried to be the statesman, he still at heart was Boris. But we did see a different type of Boris today, less of a joker, you might say. And of course this follows hard on the heels of his 4,200-word piece that he wrote for the Daily Telegraph, somewhat upstaging, you might say, Theresa May's speech that she went to give in Florence. He's said by those that know him best to be fiercely ambitious, desperately keen to be the next Prime Minister, and given, let's be frank, that the Prime Minister is far from being out of the woods in terms of her premiership, we could, by Christmas, face the fact that the Conservative Party would be looking for a new leader, and we, in turn, looking for a new Prime Minister. I want to know from you, can you see Boris Johnson as the next Prime Minister? If you think, yeah, actually, do you know what? He's got his act together, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Perhaps you think, no, sorry, I still can't take him seriously, in which case text to 84850, or perhaps you've got some advice for Boris as to what he needs to do to reach the very top of that greasy pole, in which case you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can watch me on Facebook. I'm live here in London, and you can comment using that medium too. And we have a new caller, another person with the misfortune to be called Nigel, who lives in Plymouth. Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak to you.
Well, thank you.
I think Boris in the past has probably been a little bit untrustworthy.
Uh-huh.
I think he is seizing the initiative. He's got a degree of respect for Donald Trump, which I think is totally appropriate.
I think that's true. I think that's true, actually, yes. Yes, I agree with that. But Nigel, do you take him seriously?
Yes, I do. I live in Plymouth. My sister lives in London. When he was fighting for his second term as mayor, I was sitting in a petrol station listening to the radio, and I was impressed by the amount of detail that he actually gave to the people that were phoning in. So I think he's an intelligent man. When he was mayor of London, he brought in some top advisors, and I think he did a relatively good job.
No, okay. And of course, he appeared regularly on LBC, an absolute regular on LBC. Boris, who has not just appeared as a guest and done phone-ins with Nick Ferrari, he's also hosted shows here too, as indeed did another old Etonian, Jacob Rees-Mogg, this morning. So, Nigel, you think his track record as Mayor of London was a good one? He kept out of trouble, he delegated well. You see him as a future Prime Minister?
I do. I think he made the underground a lot safer. I know some people who work for Transport for London, and they were actually full of praise for how he did make the tube safer by banning alcohol. So I think he's a man that can deal with issues. If he could bring a decent team in, I'd like to see John Redwood brought in as one of our major negotiators in Europe.
You're on the Eurosceptic wing, Nigel, aren't you?
Yes.
Just a bit.
And one of the people that most impresses me is Aaron Banks. That man needs to basically be involved in strategy.
Boris and Aaron together, wow, that would be a very exciting lunch to go to. See how they spark off each other. And Nigel, let me just ask you one more question. There are some that say that Boris would be unsuitable for the top job because of some aspects of his private life. Do you think they matter, or do you, like me, think no one cares anymore?
I don't think anybody cares. I think things are so bad in this country at the moment, both in the domestic agenda, with issues to do with law and order, with the way things are going, with negotiations within Europe. It looks as if we're going to be turned over by those people.
So we just want the right person, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Fine. Nigel, you couldn't have been clearer. Nigel there from Plymouth saying Boris did a very good job as the Mayor of London and has a good relationship with Trump and that administration. And, hey, that matters in a world with threats like North Korea. Leslie says to me by Twitter, we already have one substandard Prime Minister. We don't want another. Nigel, yes, go Boris. We love him, says Kate on text. I can't see any way in which Boris Johnson will make a suitable Prime Minister. He is the most annoying person to listen to, even though I agree with most of what he says Brian. Well, Brian, a lot of people love Boris. He makes them laugh a lot, just looking at him sometimes. And even today, when he was playing Mr. Serious, he hadn't combed his hair properly. I mean, there are things he just can't do. But he does, of course, I accept, upset a lot of people too. Jack is calling me from Stockton-on-Tees, another new caller to this show. Jack, good evening. What do you think?
Good evening, Nigel. I think Boris Johnson has absolutely the potential to be Prime Minister. I think he's the most conservative and the most British politician within the Conservative Party. But what we have at the moment is we have a cabinet full of arch-Remainers, or Ramonas, I should say, in terms of Philip Hammond and Amber Rudd. Why on earth?
Does Philip Hammond ever smile, Jack? I mean, is Philip Hammond permanently miserable, or is it me, you know?
Well, I don't know, but he must pay an absolute fortune in psychiatrist bills because he's the most depressing man I must have
No, it's not him paying. It's we're paying the bills, not him, because he depresses me, Jack.
Expenses. Probably goes in expenses, just like Tony Blair's teeth.
Get back to Boris. I
think absolutely. But Boris Johnson is the Conservative within the Conservative Party, and I think one point that needs to be made is that we haven't had a genuinely Conservative Party in Great Britain for many, many years now. But, you see, if we have this discussion, which we're having now, of will Boris Johnson be the next Prime Minister, come this time in 2 years' time, because it's the Tory party, we'll be saying, well, could Jacob Rees-Mogg or could someone else be the next Prime Minister?
Do you think it's possible, Jack, is it possible to have a conversation about the next Prime Minister who didn't go to a school just west of London, do you think? I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? It's remarkable, isn't it? That here we're talking about two old Etonians again, after David Cameron, not so long ago. Maybe that's not a bad thing, but it is certainly interesting. Jack, I'm going to disagree with you on something. I don't think Boris is the most conservative figure in the Conservative Party. Indeed, when it comes to the issue of immigration, he actually, in the past, has advocated amnesties for illegal immigrants and has never shown himself to be tough on that issue at all.
Well, the thing is, the Conservative Party, as collectively, has never really portrayed itself to be tough on the issue of immigration, nor as many other parties. So that's an issue which has always been in the long grass, so to speak. Nobody has ever really spoken about it, and that's through.
Well, I did my best, Jack. I did my best to talk about it, and
you got my vote, Nigel.
And I noticed, thank you. I noticed that the more I talked about it, and the more people like Jack from Stockton-on-Tees voted for it, the more they started to talk about it. Funny that. So, Jack, you're 100% behind him, yeah?
Well, I'd say 70%. I would like to see Jacob Rees-Mogg as Prime Minister, but, you know, I think that's a little bit too...
OK, so Jacob first, Boris second. Jack from Stockton-on-Tees, thank you. And I get here on Twitter, Boris Johnson is smarter than people give him credit for, but never a Prime Minister. He's no Jacob Rees-Mogg, is he? So it's Eton, Eton, Eton all the way. Solomon is a new caller from Stockport. Solomon, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Just wanted to say thank you for what you've done. You've made massive sacrifices to, bring us Brexit when it must have seemed absolutely hopeless for you. Made personal sacrifices, and it's just...
Well, it did seem hopeless, Solomon, and I remember on New Year's Day 2016 thinking, gosh, am I going to be the only recognisable political figure that backs Brexit? Is everybody else going to run away for fear they can't win the referendum? And I will say this for Boris, he may have hummed and hawed. He may have come to the party late, but he did back Brexit, and I believe that made a difference. I suspect, Solomon, particularly in London and the South East. So I'm pleased that he did it. But do you see him as a PM, Solomon?
Well, I mean, it makes a difference to me to have someone who actually backed Brexit. I mean, at first I admired May because she was, obviously Remain, and she came out saying, it's the people's choice, I'm going to back it. And if call me naive at first, I thought maybe there's something in it. With May and Cameron, the impression I get is they're very sort of... I don't see any sincerity from them. I think they're very good at feeding, telling the lines they've been fed. I think Bojo is a bit too sort of buffoonish, such that we do see a human side to him. I think he'd just end up, blurting out things that he's not meant to do.
He's very good at that, isn't he? Mind you, you could argue that the US president says some things that are pretty unconventional, and sort of a mini Trump has just won the election in the Czech Republic. So maybe, Solomon, maybe we're moving on to different times. I thank you very much for your call. It's Boris night here on the Nigel Farage Show, and we were asking you, after that speech he gave today, when he came across as rather more statesmanlike and scripted and serious, and furthermore was prepared to tackle the tough question of North Korea and what Trump should do, is he ready to be Prime Minister? Now, Ralph says to me by text, Nigel, quit making a fool of yourself. One silly speech and Boris is your hero. When he says something silly tomorrow, as he surely will, what then? Ralph, I haven't given you my opinion yet, so I'm not saying I was won over by his speech, but I will give you my opinion. I first met Boris back in the 1990s when a very good friend of mine, who I worked with in the commodities business, a chap that had been at school with Boris all the way through in Eton, introduced me to him. We had a couple of lunches. At the time, I was completely unknown. He was a little bit known, but not really that much. He was enormous fun to be with, full of anecdotes, humour, wit. Thoroughly enjoyed both the times we had lunch and got together. Good fun. Lunches that ended later than I think lunches in the business world do these days. But I have to say, during the referendum, I was thrilled he came out and back the Leave side. I don't believe without him we would have got over the line. I think he played a very significant role indeed. Something his sister Rachel, who of course is an ardent, absolutely fanatical Remainer, I think she knows her brother coming on at the end there did make a big difference. But I remember about 5 weeks before now, the referendum, I was on the phone to him, and he had his bus going around the country, or his coach rather going around the country with the 350 million figure on the side, and I had an open-top double-decker with music blaring. The Great Escape, actually, was what we chose to play. I said, this is really crazy, Boris. Why don't we Why don't we have a coming together at some point? You, me, and Kate Hoey, who's got a Labour bus going around the country. Why don't the three of us converge on a market centre to show that whilst we're in different campaigns, we're actually on the same side? And he rather liked that. He said, oh, yes, he said, a little bit like the American army and the Russians meeting on the Elbe in Germany in 1945. And I liked that. He said it was a really great idea that those three separate campaigns would come together, big, united front, to show the voters that it didn't matter whether you were left, centre or right. This was about Brexit, our country. And he really agreed with it. He was excited by it. And then he said, I'll have to ask my people. I said, I'm sorry? Oh, I'll have to ask my people. I said, what, you mean the apparatchiks, the paid apparatchiks that run the campaign? Oh, well, I'll have to check with them. I said, you could be Prime Minister in 6 weeks' time. Can't you make a decision? And you know what? He couldn't. And that does worry me a little bit. I'm not sure he is good at making decisions. I see him rather like a political butterfly. He's here for a bit, and then there's a prettier flower over there. And I'm not sure, I disagree with the earlier caller we had, I'm not sure, actually, in terms of political philosophy, he's that deeply rooted in almost anything. So is he a good thing for the country? Is he a good thing for us on the world stage? Yes, he's recognised. People know who he is. He also shows we still have a good sense of humour in this country, which is no bad thing. Is he a good ambassador for Britain? Overall, I would say absolutely yes. Do I see him as a Prime Minister? Personally, I don't. So there you go, Ralph. You jumped the gun with that text a bit, didn't you? Lee is calling from Aberystwyth in West Wales. Lee, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. I've just said what I've said, Lee. I like Boris. I respect Boris. I think he's got a great intellect, huge personality. I think he's great for the country. It's right he should be in the cabinet. I just don't see him as Prime Minister material, Lee. What do you think?
Well, just first of all, let me thank you on a personal level for all that you've done to bring us, this close to our independence so far. I'd just like to thank you.
Thank you.
Great fan of you.
We're not quite there yet, Lee. There's a little bit of spade work left, I think. But anyway,
this close, anyway. No, I'd just like to share just for this debate that. So far, at university, there's a tutor I've got. I'm not going to mention names, but basically he was a researcher who worked very closely with Boris Johnson in the previous years. And he said that the very moment that you underestimate Boris Johnson, the way he likes to act a bit like the guy, he likes to mess around a bit. That is exactly where he wants you to be. He's got you in his arms at that very moment. He's a very smart individual. But I just thought I'd like to share that.
Yeah, no, well, Lee, I think, if you get comments from people that have worked closely, and clearly as a researcher he would have worked closely. I take that, Lee. I take that point, and the fact you kept it anonymous I think is absolutely right and correct and proper. Lee, thank you. Second caller we've had, one previously saying he was a good mayor of London, he delegated well, and Lee spoke to one of his researchers who said, basically, don't underestimate him. Chris says, I can see Boris as PM. He's not like the other politicians. He knows his flaws and admits when he's wrong. Yet he's often had to say sorry, hasn't he? Various cities in the country that he's been derogatory about, and he's had to apologise. Boris for Prime Minister, even if it's just to scare the life out of the EU Commission, says Philip. Well, certainly, I can tell you, in the European Parliament, they are much happier with Mrs May than with somebody who was a genuine Eurosceptic, and that wouldn't really matter whether it was Boris or perhaps even David Davis. David Davis for PM, he's a leaver, not like Mrs May who wants to stay in. So I do think Brussels are much happier with May than they would be if it was Boris. Joseph is calling from Finchley. Joseph, good evening. Would you make a good PM?
Yes, I think so. Yes, he will make a great prime minister, in my view, because of his intellectual clout. Although he does sometimes, he seems to be hesitating in saying certain things, but in general, the personality he has will show up when he is in a big role as prime minister, I think, and especially considering all the reasonings he made in the article he published in the Telegraph, and also the arguments he has made so far, and I've listened to that closely. I think he will have the capacity and also the audacity to tackle this Brexit issue. And because, currently what we have is primarily hesitation and sometimes deviation from the road that we decided to go to. And we need that, I think, quite seriously. And in my view, he cannot be underestimated.
No. Well, you're not the first person, Joseph, to say that this evening, and I will agree that the piece in the Telegraph, the 4,200-word piece in the Telegraph, was good. Not just that it was well written, but it actually had a vision for where the country goes post-Brexit, something that is desperately lacking from Mrs May. So, Joseph, as you can see, I'm a fan of Boris Johnson. I just don't see him being the right person for that top job. Joseph, thank you very much indeed. And Joseph, in fact, every one of them so far tonight have been new callers thus far. No way. Boris needs to be kept on a lead so he doesn't embarrass our country. International leaders laugh at him and would do with him being our Prime Minister. That's what Ryan in Bournemouth thinks. But several of you saying he couldn't do worse than Mrs May. And I've got more, Boris lacks the ability to convince large swathes of non-Conservative voters, something that Jacob Rees-Mogg would be so much more capable of doing. It's Eton versus Eton. It keeps on going. Alex is my next caller from Tower Hamlets. Is Boris the right guy to take over from May at the right time, whenever that is?
Yes, I think so. I just wanted to say that you did a really good interview with the ITV this morning. Very
thank you.
That Sikorsky character.
Thank you.
I'll go straight on to Boris.
Yeah.
As I said to your producer, he's capable of being a Prime Minister, but with some caveats. He's got to pay attention to detail. And I do believe he's doing that.
What, in terms of focusing, yeah?
In general, I mean, he does come across sometimes as a little bit of a nutty professor when he speaks in Parliament.
Right, okay.
He's got to stop the stand a little bit.
Yeah.
Shuffling his hair every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I did say, Alex, earlier I said that his hair wasn't combed today, but I'm prepared to stand corrected, because somebody texted me in and said, no, actually, he had combed his hair, but then he'd done, as you called it, the Stan Laurel bit, and it had all fluffed up. So, yeah, he does do that.
He's got the intelligence to be a Prime Minister, and he's good with people. That's the main thing. I mean, the electorate love him. I mean, I'm Tower Hamlets. I come up to Romford and Hornchurch and around that area quite a bit.
Yep.
And he's absolutely loved up here. So,
Alex, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that he does. In many, many people, he makes them smile, they like him, they respect him, they see his intellect. I thank you. Lynn says, Boris speaks several languages. That would help on the world stage. Not so sure, they all speak English now. Suzanne says, we love him, but not that much to have him as Prime Minister. But Alan says, and remember, there are people that think the other way, and quite a lot of them, Boris is a buffoon. He's incapable of representing us to the world. Do you remember when Mr. Juncker came to Downing Street to have dinner, and within a few hours, out in the press were reports that Mr. Juncker thought Mrs. May was deluded if she thought she was going to get a good trade deal without paying away lots and lots of money. Well, a couple of weeks ago, the roles were reversed, and Mrs. May went to Jean-Claude's for dinner in Brussels, and blow me down if the same thing hasn't happened again. This time, in a German newspaper, it says that at their private dinner on the 16th of October, she appeared anxious, tormented, despondent, discouraged, and she begged for help. And here was Jean-Claude Juncker being confronted today about these press stories.
President Juncker, hello. Hello. How are you? Can we ask about the dinner with Mrs. May?
Yes.
Did you tell the German press what happened?
No, never. I'm really surprised, if not shocked, by what has been written in the German press, and of course repeated by the British press. Nothing is true in all this. I had an excellent working dinner with Theresa May. She was in good shape. She was not tired. She was fighting. as is her duty, so everything for me was okay.
So she didn't plead with you for help?
No. No. That's not the style of British Prime Ministers.
Well, Mrs May, if she is in good shape, certainly in better shape than Jean-Claude Juncker is, who was struggling a bit for breath there, I thought, having walked up a small flight of stairs. Twice this has happened, so my advice, Mrs May, if you want to spread a rumour out across the whole globe, tell something to Jean-Claude Juncker and his Chief of Staff, Martin Selmayr, something in confidence. Now, end of last week, the Brussels summit, Mrs May was there. Today, she came back to the House of Commons to give a progress report, and this is my view of just how much further forward she got at that summit. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We're wading in treacle. We've gone absolutely nowhere. And yet she says, we don't have any agreement, but it is going to happen. We will see. Now, very interesting one here. Rory Stewart, who is a Foreign Office junior minister, confirmed yesterday a British policy that the hundreds of British jihadist volunteers in Syria are facing death rather than that of being arrested and put through the judicial system. He follows on from Brett McGurk, the US envoy to the coalition against ISIS, who said that the mission of the Allies was to kill every foreign fighter that went to Syria. So it was really, really strong stuff to hear from a junior minister. And he said, look, they are our enemies, they are executing people, they are torturing people, and he says, I'm afraid we have to deal with that, accepting there are very difficult moral issues. Well, let me, Mr. Stewart, give you a more pressing, if you like, moral issue. There are 400 plus of these people who were fighting in Syria who've been allowed to come back into this country. So are you advocating, if we're going to take out British citizens who are, in Syria with drone strikes or whatever it will be, a deliberate policy of killing them, murdering them, use whatever language you choose, would you then support the death penalty for those people that have returned to this country? Of course, now we're leaving the European Union, we're allowed to bring back the death penalty. It's barred under EU rules. And I wonder, Mr. Stewart, do you think, if it's right to kill them there, would you want them killed here? Listen, folks, we're leaving the European Union. The death penalty isn't going to come back anyway. There isn't any more the public appetite for it. But I do think it's extraordinary that a government that now advocates drone strikes to take out individual British citizens has been lax enough to only stop one from coming back into this country. I simply can't believe it. Back to Boris. Is he fit to be the PM? Is he a buffoon? Or is he actually a genius who would give us a whole different image on the world stage, having shown, as Mayor of London, that actually he can run stuff? And Mike, another new caller from Worcester. Good evening.
Hi there, how's it going?
Well, it's going well. But how well would it go? How well would it go, Mike, if Boris was PM?
Well, for me, I mean, I feel like I'm just stepping outside of the youth demographic at like nearly 30, but even so, I look at Boris and I like to laugh at him. I enjoy him as a person, and that makes him unfit to lead a country.
Do you laugh, Mike, at him, or do you laugh with him?
No, I laugh at him, and that's the worrying thing.
Right.
And this is the thing with all, like, you've got Theresa May, apparently, that I can't relate to. I come from a background where I don't understand. They don't relate to me at all. And then I look at Boris and I think, well, he's from the same background, but now I'm laughing at that background. I just can't.
Is your comment, Mike, is your comment based on the fact that his home county's Eton? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's Eton versus Eton, and I come from a small high school, and I want somebody that's normal.
Well, hang on. I mean, in defence of Etonians, I'm sure some of them are normal. I've never met one myself. But no, look, of course they can produce some wonderful people. It is just extraordinary, though, isn't it? In the 21st century, just how dominant that school still is in British politics.
It is, yeah. And that's the thing, is that I like Boris, but like I said, I like to laugh at him. I like to look on Facebook and I think all the stupid things he's done, and I just don't come across all the things, all the good he does.
So he adds to the gaiety of life, but is not the right guy to be PM, Mike.
Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you very much for ringing in to LBC. Malcolm is calling from Nottingham. Malcolm, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, you're another one. I think when I read out the fact that new callers have called, I think it encourages people who think otherwise we'd simply never, ever get through. Malcolm, what made you pick up the phone?
I'd just like to say hello to you, baby.
Oh, well, that's all right. Well, very good. Good evening.
Good evening. I've just been listening to you with Boris and etc. being making a good Prime Minister. I personally don't think he'd make a good Prime Minister, but all my life I don't think I've ever fully respected any Prime Minister. I think the British government in general have been quite weak over everything, and they soon back down, and then you get the likes of Blair, whatever he was, I don't want to know. It was just hateful person. That's it.
Well, that's your view. I mean, millions loved him, Malcolm. But Malcolm, so you're another one then that likes Boris but doesn't see him as PM, yeah?
I don't say I like him or I don't dislike him either. I don't pay any attention to him, really.
Okay, so come on then, Malcolm. If it's not Boris, who do you think would be a good Prime Minister?
Well, there's only one I'd respect, and I think he's a strong guy and he knows his facts. That is Rees-Mogg.
Rees-Mogg. Well, you see, there we are, Mogg mania. Malcolm, can I ask you, did you listen to Jacob this morning? Because he was guest hosting for James O'Brien this morning on LBC between 10 and 1. Did you listen in?
Away today.
Okay.
I didn't listen to the television and radio at all today.
Right, well, I tell you what, Malcolm, as a Rees-Mogg fan, and for all of you out there, whether you like Jacob or you loathe Jacob, doesn't really matter, but he was on LBC today, and the highlights, the best of Mogg on LBC from this morning, you can get by simply going to lbc.co.uk. Malcolm, I recommend that you do it. I thank you for your call. Mike is ringing me from Edinburgh. Mike, good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
So, is Boris the boy or not?
Well, I think he has a bit of a credibility issue. You know, he has the reputation as being a bit of a buffoon. We kind of know that. But he does have a lot of things going for him. He's intelligent. I think he's undeniably a skilled politician. But the most important thing is that he voted Leave. And he is the politician who voted Leave who has the best shot of becoming Prime Minister, isn't he?
Well, him or I suppose David Davis would have a shot at it too, wouldn't he?
Sure. But either way, to be honest with you, I mean, yeah, the fact is, I think the most important thing is that it's someone who voted Leave. We can't have so many politicians in that cabinet, senior cabinet positions filled by people who voted Remain. Given what's going on with these negotiations and the increasing talk there is about there being some kind of referendum at the end of all of this, it's absolutely essential that it's someone who actually believes in Brexit. I mean, you'll know better than anyone, the EU are going to be dead set on creating the worst possible deal for the UK, even if it means shooting themselves in the foot.
Absolutely. Well, that's at least what Brussels wants to do. I'm hoping to see, as the months go on, some genuine common sense coming from the member states. But no. Listen, I agree with you, Mike, completely that it does need to be a lever that takes us through and actually takes the ship of state and turns it around by 180 degrees, because that's what the Brexit referendum told the government to do. You need somebody with belief. So, as far as you're concerned, Mike, it could be Boris, yeah?
But here's the thing. If the European Union want the negotiations to go badly, and there's any talk about any kind of referendum, let's bear in mind there's a lot of conflation around what the question would be. Are we talking about a deal or no deal and let's have a Brexit referendum? Or are we talking about Brexit or no Brexit? And if there's any whiff of it being the latter, the negotiations are completely undermined. And the fact that there is a Remainer in number 10...
Yeah, I agree.
...leads me to believe that they could well be sabotaging the negotiations.
Well, that's going a bit far, but let's put it like that. Let's put it like this, Mike. It isn't going very well. Mike from Edinburgh, another new caller. I thank you very much indeed. The trouble with Boris is he doesn't really want the job as PM. He had the opportunity when Cameron resigned. Rees-Mogg is the man, says Ollie. Others say Boris is not silly. He's a clever man. But another says to me on Twitter, Boris, he couldn't run a bath. If you're just tuning in, we're discussing a senior political figure in this country and asking whether he could become the next Prime Minister, particularly given Theresa May's great vulnerability at the moment. Now, if you haven't been listening, I'll give you some clues as to who it is. This is the type of language this man uses. Gloomodom poppers. to describe merchants of gloom. Greased piglet to describe a slippery or elusive individual. Mugwump, which is a term he used to describe Jeremy Corbyn. A whingerama, which, as he says, is the intense whinging going on from those who can't accept Brexit. And whiff-waff, which apparently was an early form of ping-pong. That, I think, was at the Beijing Olympics, when London was up next, and he gave a remarkable speech in which he said ping-pong is coming home. On UKIP, he has said, I can hardly condemn UKIP as a bunch of boss-eyed, foam-flecked Euro hysterics when I have been sometimes not far short myself of being boss-eyed, foam-flecked and hysterical. And on the European Union, he described it, he said, it's a stitch-up. It's the biggest stitch-up since the Bayeux Tapestry. So it's Boris Johnson that we're talking about, who I think in many ways is rewriting his own version of the Oxford English Dictionary. He is flowery, he is fun, he is bright, he is a massive personality. Some people like him, some people can't stand him. I like him very much. I think he's great. I think the fact that he backed Brexit politically really mattered. I'm not so sure where he stands on everything else. I'm just not convinced he's right to be Prime Minister. Ross on Facebook says, Andrea Leadsom or maybe Davis for PM, not Boris. So Ross saying it needs to be a leaver, but not necessarily him. Stefan says the establishment wouldn't sleep soundly with Boris as PM. Home Secretary would be the best for Boris, not Foreign Secretary. Simon is another new caller from South Norwood. Good evening, Simon.
Good evening, Nigel. I'm a first-time caller, so bear with me, I'm a little nervous.
Well, welcome, and don't be nervous. Just think we're having a chat over a cup of tea or a pint or whatever your thing is, you know.
Right, with Boris, what's been frustrating me on the show so far, we're 50 minutes into it, is that it's been on the tip of my tongue and no one's saying what really needs to be said. And that is, he bottled it. Almost, when was it, last year in June after the referendum. He had every opportunity to be Prime Minister. And for me, he lacked courage and he lacked guts. Now, let's look at Margaret Thatcher in 1975. It didn't look like she had a chance when she challenged Ted Heath, for those of you that can remember that far back. I don't patronise anyone. Let's look at David Cameron in, when was it, 2005 in November. He was the outsider. David Davis was going to be the leader of the opposition. That's what everyone said. It didn't happen. So, to me, it's absolutely essential that someone has the courage, the tenacity and the sheer guts to actually put themselves above the parapet.
Well, Simon, you have brought together very well a couple of things that I've said. I said earlier on the show that I found him in the run-up to last June to be indecisive.
Yeah.
I also later on described him as a butterfly, didn't I? Okay.
Yes.
And you then have gone back to that period and said that he bottled it. So what happened? What happened? We've had the referendum result on the Friday morning, all right?
Yep.
Cameron has resigned at 9 o'clock dramatically in Downing Street. There is a leadership contest or coronation about to happen. Andrea Leadsom had said to Boris that she was more than prepared to support his bid for leadership, provided she became the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he was to let her know by text by a certain time on Saturday whether that was the case or not. Guess what happened, Simon?
Well, I wasn't aware of that at all.
Hang on, let me finish it through, because it backs up everything you have precisely said, bringing together my earlier points. So where was Boris on the Saturday? Playing cricket. And probably having a few beers and a good day, and he never ever got back to Andrea Leadsom. It simply slipped his mind. She took that as a sign that she was not going to be part of his main team, and in the Sunday newspapers we got the announcement that Andrea Leadsom was going to have a run to be Prime Minister. That run didn't last long, but Boris had lost support. Gove had decided that he wasn't suitable, and I think that sums up, in a way, Simon, why I don't think he's right to be leader. He is indecisive. He does move around on issues. you know, I like him as a person. Simon, I'm pleased you picked up the phone call. You're absolutely right. But he didn't bottle it. He blew it. All right? He blew it. He had an opportunity there, and just through a combination of disorganisation and laziness, the chance slipped. Simon, thank you for your call. Do call the show again. I thank you very much indeed. Dave is calling me from Shrewsbury. Dave, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, is Boris the right man to be our PM?
No, I don't think he is. I think you've just, in your few words just now, I think you've encapsulated exactly what I think about Boris.
Yep.
He changes his mind. He doesn't know where he's going. He tends to hunt with the hounds and run with the hare.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the best candidate would be David Davis.
Yeah.
And I think alongside him as EU negotiator, because obviously he wouldn't do that, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg would be a perfect EU negotiator. And I think David Davis has had his wings held back a bit by the Remainers in the cabinet and the Prime Minister, because I don't think he's been given a free rein to do what he wants to do.
He looks like he's there stuck piggy in the middle, doesn't it, really?
He does, yeah.
You know, he's got a divided cabinet, and he's, I agree with you. I think he's in a very difficult position.
He is, but I think if he got the freedom, then I think he could do a great job as a negotiator, but I think he would be even better as Prime Minister, frankly.
Fine. Dave from Shrewsbury, another new caller. Thank you for that very clear point of view. Walter disagrees with this entire programme and this entire debate. He says, no, Nigel, he's doing his job as Foreign Secretary and sticking to his brief, which is where he should stay. Theresa May is the Prime Minister until 2021. Walter, I'll give you my mobile phone number after the show. At evens, I'll have any bet you want, all right? And I mean any bet you want that she is not there in 2021. She may not be there even by the time Christmas comes. She's in big trouble. And the fact she appeared before the House of Commons today and couldn't report any progress whatsoever, to be teased and tormented and torn to bits by Jeremy Corbyn, says to me about all we need to know. And my last caller this evening on this subject is Stuart from Putney. Stuart, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, I mean, he was a terrible mayor. He wasted, I think it was 890 million on vanity projects. There was the Garden Bridge, there was Boris, the stupid cycle lanes, there was Boris Island, a feasibility study on Boris Island. So we know he was an absolutely abysmal mayor. He's not being a good foreign secretary. He's definitely not. He's got no qualifications at all. He's fine as a journalist, and that's about it.
Well, he's actually a very good journalist, isn't he? And a good writer. And I bought and read at Christmas. I was given at Christmas and read his up-to-date book on Churchill that he's done. Tell you what, it's a great read. It's a complex subject. He's written about it beautifully. He's great at all those things. I'm pleased you phoned about the Mayor of London thing, because a couple of callers had said what a great job he did. I've got to tell you, Stuart, those cycle lanes, if you try and drive now from, say, Westminster out through the east of London, you know, heading out towards the M11 or whatever it may be, you've got to allow 40 minutes to get past Tower Hill, because in the middle of the day, there's not a single bike on those roads, and yet there's a huge, huge cycle lane. Stuart, I thank you. Great debate from everybody. Lots of passion, lots of belief. Nothing I've said tonight have I said wishing in any way to be unkind about Boris. I like him, but I'm not sure that he really has a great political philosophy behind him. I'm not sure he's decisive enough. He'll be a major part of public life for many years to come. I'm pleased about that. I simply don't see him as PM.